Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about the boogie shuffle and the ways of phrasing the boogie shuffle, and we're going to come back again in this lesson to the boogie shuffle, but we're combining it with some of the ideas that we're picking up from other rhythm parts, specifically the walking bass pattern that we covered in the last lesson. Now, if I'm in the key of A, for example, a typical variation on the boogie pattern would be to add more notes to the phrase. And what we're used to doing right now is we play the root in the fifth, and then we add the sixth, right? So the basic pattern. Just going back and forth between those two notes. What we hear from the walking bass is we get the root, the third, the fifth, sixth, and the seventh, right? Well, we can integrate that into the boogie pattern as well, like this. Right? It kind of expands the palette a little bit, same rhythmic effect. It's a variation that you hear on lots of blues records where the guitar player just sort of adds that note in. It's a judgment call, whether you use just the sixth or you add the seventh, but it's an easy move to do in the open key. Right? Now, when you're in a movable key, like A at the fifth fret, you need to stretch. Now, depending on the size of your hands and how comfortable you feel, that can be a monster stretch, almost undoable, or it could be within reach. But if you find that it's kind of beyond your means and you're playing in a key where you can't use open strings, that's where the old capo comes into play. And you just clamp it. Let's say you want to play that in the key of G, you just clamp it at the third fret, and suddenly G becomes the same as open E. It's very simple. So the capo was always there as kind of a safety valve for more complicated stretches and technical stuff like that. Let's go back to open A for a second. Another typical embellishment that's related to the walking line is adding notes to the bottom end of the pattern. In other words, now what I'm playing there is the A chord, and then with my second finger I add the C. That's the minor third. And then my third finger I add the major third. Now in the walking pattern, we get the major third spot on, so in the adding a little bit of an embellishment, setting up that note with the minor third. Again, a typical guitar variation on the boogie pattern. Taking it even further in open position there, I can add a transitional phrase like this. So I'm taking advantage of the ease with which I can finger those notes, and I've got the upper part, and I lead into that A from below, G, G sharp, A. And it just makes the pattern sound a little bit more full. Now when you transfer that to a higher position on the neck and use a bar chord, that can be tricky. One way to do it is just put your fourth finger to work. Right? It's a good thing to do. It also strengthens your fourth finger to use for other purposes as well. But if you find that that's daunting and causes your rhythm feel to suffer a little bit, here's an alternative, which is shifting position. Now, what I'm doing there is kind of a little deceptive. I play the A chord, and then I let go of the A. I'm not going to play that again. And I shift my hand up 2 frets, and I substitute my first finger for my third finger. slapping those. Right? Again, these embellishments expand on the idea of the boogie pattern. They provide more color. They kind of lock the pattern in with the bass more, so it makes the sound bigger on the bottom end. These are not like the #1 essential go-to patterns as much as the straight boogie shuffle, but they're typical variations. So let's apply that to the 12 bar, but before we do, I'm gonna show you a little bit more sort of variations that you hear on different kinds of shuffles. Again, the idea is to expand the boogie shuffle. One way to do it is, you might have heard something like this on some shuffles. Oh yeah, kicking it old school on the ending there. Remember that? We used that quite a while ago as an ending in the open A 12 bar shuffle. Now, you could hear how big those rhythm parts sound relative to our, right? So I'm slapping at the strings, I'm muting the extra notes that I don't want to hear, and basically expanding the sound of the guitar so that I'm riding up on top of the bass. I'm using parts of the bass pattern, but I'm also building on top of that and creating just a sort of a more dramatic effect. And I'm also using from time to time this technique that we've touched on before. Dragging the pick upward across the strings. We're going to explore that in more detail a little bit later on. It provides kind of just a rhythmic fill as opposed to a melodic fill, right? Right? You can use it in different places. You don't want to overuse it. It's a little bit distracting if it's too common, but it sort of helps fill in that rhythm in an interesting way. So right there, we've got a couple of different flavors that we've added to the boogie shuffle. I want to do one more before we move on. And that's, instead of playing the notes all together to create this really big sound, I want to kind of separate the notes to create a smaller, more focused sound. And there's one particular song that in the history of blues is one of the biggest hit records ever for a blues, and it was called Honky Tonk. It was a record that was done in the 1950s, and the artist is Bill Doggett, who was actually the organ player. But the song was invented by the guitar player, Billy Butler, and the sax player, Clifford Scott. And the guitar part was like this. I'll show you real quick, and then we'll break it down for you. It goes... and so forth. Now, that's a shuffle in F, and a shuffle in F is a stretch by anyone's standards, right? The frets are the farthest apart there, so you really have to reach out. Now, he's using the 7th note there. Now, to reach up and get that on the 5th string, forget it, right? So he came up with a very clever solution, which is he uses the 4th string. In other words, bars across the 1st fret. So we're playing the bottom part of the standard boogie pattern, but separating the notes. And I'm I'm using downstroke, upstroke in my right hand. And then using the 7th as an extra melodic part of the pattern on the 4th string. And same thing on the 4 chord. When it goes up to the C, same thing. If you hear that recording, you'll hear how kind of cool and captivating it is. The story on that record was that they invented that song. They were playing it at a dance, and Billy Butler just went into that pattern. And everybody else in the band just joined in. It was just a jam, but the audience heard it and they started dancing. And the legend is that they came up afterwards and said, play that again. You know, they played it again. Then they came up and said, play it again. You know, played it again. And they did it like 9 times, you know. Everybody just loved that thing. And so they put it out as a record after that. And became a huge hit record. It's still a blues standard today. So this is a really good rhythm part to know and a good technique to know as well. Let's play it with the rhythm pattern. Now we've got the rhythm section 12-bar blues in F, and we're going to play the honky-tonk variation, separating the bass notes. Just invented a little ending on the spot there, just playing a blues run and then end on the 9th chord. Now I varied it somewhat in the 2nd chorus. Those are all options, you know, but the idea is the technique. So we've got 2 different ways of approaching the boogie right now. One is to sort of fatten it up by adding extra notes in the bass pattern and slapping at the strings and creating a really big, powerful sound. And the other one is to thin it out, separate the notes and kind of define the sound. And each one works in its own way, creating a different color. And it's something that you could apply to a different type of a boogie shuffle to make it interesting, okay? Mess around with those and we'll come back and talk some more about boogie shuffles.